You know what I mean? It seems to be that they hold on to certain material almost so that they can re-inject it at a later point. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
you know that I was on Coast to Coast this past May,
That's right. Yep.
the night of May 3rd and 4th. And I told my dad when it was finalized I was going on. This was Sunday night. We spoke from 10 to 10:30, and he's 89, so he was hoping he was going to be around to watch the story unfold. He didn't know how it would unfold. I said, "Well, get ready." He said, "Yep, something's going to happen." 30 minutes later, we heard that Bin Laden was killed.
Ah, yeah, that's right. Of course, I forgot. Yeah.
The next morning, my dad emailed me and said, "See, your book's dangerous. It got Bin Laden killed again."
That's a good one. That's good. So, so in a way, it's getting out there a little bit more than Judy, right? It's the message is getting out there. People are interested. They want to listen, right? They want to hear about this stuff. Most of them, anyway.
Right, a lot of people do, but it's finding it through the forest. You know, the few little trees in this big forest of nonsense, which becomes difficult. And most people don't have time. They want to be told their opinion, and they've been trained to do that through television. If it's not on TV, it's not real.
Yep.
And that gets really scary. We need to have a culture where people can think, or else we all become robots.
That's right, and that's what they want us to be, isn't that the truth? At the end of the day, we're sitting hearing the talking heads, and as I said, before, Judy, you also have the different levels of this. Of course, people are trapped, in a sense, on different belief systems, and this goes into different levels. As I mentioned, the official story, then you have the popular unofficial story, and from there it just goes up or down the scale, I guess, in one sense, right?
Right, and there's the only way to maintain independent thought is to maintain independent thought. So joining groups, you get into this group think, and it's very easy to be controlled because humans don't like to step outside the norm.
Yeah, that's what's so sad about it. It hinges on belief systems in most regards. And as you say, in many cases, it's about belonging to something which is kind of countercultural. Maybe it's an identification thing in that as well, a place to belong to, basically, or a belief to kind of adhere to. It's kind of sad in one way.
Here's an interesting thought. This group, engineers and architects. I'm not wanting to criticize them specifically, but just as this organization, we have supposedly engineers and architects who join this group, 1,500 or more of them, who say there's something wrong with the official story, but they go along blindly with whatever this group dictates, and chanting, "We need new investigation."
Mm-hmm.
Well, who does an investigation but engineers and architects? If this group is supposed to have any clout as to knowing what they're talking about, they should be able to know how to conduct an investigation.
Yep.
So there's a disconnect there.
Obviously, as your book is called, this is all about where did the towers go, basically, and this is the main point. This is something that we've talked with you before about on the program, and something we could also bring up again and re-emphasize. I think one thing that always is difficult to know as an outsider, specifically if you haven't been to New York, is to appreciate, or before the 9/11, been to New York, appreciate the size of the buildings. Were you up there yourself? Did you take a look at the buildings before they came down?
Yes, I've been up there in 1975 and 76, right after they were built.
And do you have a memory of that? Still recall of how tall they were, how big the buildings were?
It was just huge things, just big boxes.
And so the obvious question is where they went, right? Where is the footprint of the buildings? Where did they go? And as we've discussed before, this is basically about them being turned into dust powder, basically. Why don't we talk a little bit about how far some of the dust spread? Don't know if you have that material close by or recall that, Judy, in terms of the... we're talking about, I think in one photo that I saw in your book, 36 kilometers approximately from the towers. Did it go further than that? Do you know how far it went?
They traced it going over Pennsylvania and down through Delaware, because it went really high up in that dust cloud, and it just was dissipating all over. It probably went all over the planet, actually. But it was, yeah. What do you call the footprint? That becomes a real question.
Mm.
There's, of course, you can see it ankle deep for quite some distance, but for it to travel that far, to be able to identify it specifically as being from the World Trade Center, is it had a unique set of qualities to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was identified like throughout New Jersey, New York, but mainly it went south and southwest. Like Pennsylvania, there was quite a lot of tracings. They could actually see the dust cloud over Pennsylvania, over across Maryland.
And how far is that approximately, would you say? Do you have a number?
Oh, 100 miles, 150 miles, 200 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a distance.
Quite a distance. I remember that the satellite photo that many people have seen, obviously, as well, showing how the incredible, dust or what looks like smoke, obviously from space, but it's dust, obviously, spreading a huge amount or very, very far, obviously. So if we compare it to some of the other buildings that we've looked at here, you compare it to one earthquake building that was part of an earthquake went down. You compared it to the big dome. What's it called again, Judy? Remind me of the dome.
The Seattle King Dome.
That's right. We have huge debris piles left from those buildings, and you would obviously expect something similar in this case, correct?
If a building fell down, well, in controlled demolitions, when they blow up a building intentionally, the dust cloud usually doesn't rise much beyond the highest point of the building. It may be a little bit, but not much, and then it settles down pretty quickly because it's coarse dust. For the Seattle King Dome, in the Seattle Times, they said that downtown was covered with dust, and dust filled the air for almost 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a very short amount of time.
Very short, yes.
And then this Pakistan earthquake that I compare it to was a parking garage or an apartment structure that pancaked down, and you have a stack of floors. And it had just happened before this picture was taken, and people were running all over the pile looking if anyone they knew they could save, and you didn't see any dust in the air. The picture is unbelievably crisp and clear. There's a little bit of dust here and there, but it fell right out of the air.
Yeah. Now, the sheer size of the buildings, would that have, if we follow the line of the official story here, would that have anything to do with it? A point of argumentation might be, well, I mean, they're so tall, so when you begin this pancake effect or whatever you should call that, these disintegrated the floors below them because more and more weight adds to it. Does that make sense? And if not, why so?
Well, of course it doesn't make sense, because if one floor just falls one floor height to smash into the next one, and it busts it up, that's as far as it's fallen. And if that was stacking up and riding down to the next one, it's not busted up. So if something busts up into dust on the way down, it can't be riding the pile down. So you don't have an accumulation of mass. Like this Pakistan earthquake, you see all the floors stacked up at the bottom.
Yeah.
But if you have the thing busted up on the way down into dust clouds, the dust clouds cannot, because there's less mass, less mass per surface area, it tends to hang in the air more. So how can it ride the pile down? It's just going to hang in the air.
That's right. And the dust took to the skies as well, as we've seen in many of these photos as well. Very interesting. How was the wind? We can see the wind current obviously that day, but is there anything that would explain it otherwise? If you look at it from the official point of view again, Judy, that would make this rise up of the dust in this way?
It's about a 7 to 9 mile per hour breeze, which is a very light breeze.
Yeah.
This was on the backside, or right parallel, I guess, that day to a hurricane. But outside of the edges of a hurricane, that you get some wind moving around, but you don't get horrendous hurricane force winds. So that wouldn't explain it either. It's you just have to. It should be kind of wafting wherever it is. But why is it so fine? Why is it so fine that it easily goes up? When buildings fall down, okay, here's a mental exercise. Throw a cinder block off the roof of the top of one of the towers, just in your mind. When it crashes to the ground, the tip that hits the ground first, or the pavement, is going to make powder, crumple it up. But that's going to cushion the material right behind that, and so forth. So you're going to end up with fine powder, medium powder, small chunks, bigger chunks, and because it's going to get busted up into a range of sizes. It's not going to all turn to powder. And what was measured in this dust, in the various dust samples, was an amazingly high amount of fine powder for the amount of mass.
And how, I don't know if there's a scale or a ratio here, but how fine was it, Judy? Can you say?
Less than 1/10 of a micron.
And if we put that in perspective of a, I don't know, particle, molecule, what have you, how big is it, do you think?
Oh, it will get down, like I said, about the size of DNA. 8 microns is about the size of a red blood cell.
Wow.
And we're talking to less than 1/10 of a micron.
Yeah. So, again then, to reemphasize some of the points, Judy, and go over some of this again here, the how would this be explained? Because we're basically talking about disintegration of matter to some degree, maybe even the breaking up of the the molecules, or how can we what kind of terminology do we put on this, Judy?
Well, there's a particular picture that, well, I call it dustification, because that's defined as whatever it was that happened. Because what happened was something we'd never seen before, and a new phenomenon needs a new word to describe it. So it's been defined as dustification. But if you look at page 336, there's a fellow with a briefcase. It looks like he's had a rough day at the office. Worse than that, that's kind of an understatement. Coming home, and the clock in the background shows it's 10:14. It was at 9:59 when the South Tower turned to dust. It was 10:28, 10:29 when the North Tower turned to dust. So this is right between the two. So he's walking home. This is east of Broadway, just barely east of Broadway. And you look, and you have very, very fine dust around his feet. But you can see his face and his shoulders clearly. That shows whatever it was settled out of the air. That dust around his feet could not have settled out of the air that fast. So it landed as coarse dust and then became fine dust.
So the process continued, that's what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's other pictures too. I call it the fuzzball intersection. I think it's the first page of that chapter, that where you're upwind about a block of the North Tower, and you see in the background blue sky, clear blue sky. Then you notice around the feet of people these fuzzballs. And then pretty soon you notice the stuff just lifting all on its own, not even need to be kicked up. And how does it settle to the ground if it's rising on its own?
Yeah.
Unless it broke down.